There is a specific date in history that historians will look back on as the moment the math finally broke. We aren't waiting for it. We are living in it. Most people are looking for a stock market crash. They are watching the Dow Jones or the S&P 500, waiting for a Black Monday event where prices drop 20% in an afternoon. If that is what you are watching, you are looking at the distraction. The real fire isn't in the stock market. It's burning in the plumbing of the global financial system, the bond market. Right now, the United States is running a financial experiment that has a 100% failure rate in the history of economics. We are attempting to solve a debt crisis by issuing more debt, while simultaneously losing the one thing that allowed us to get away with it for 80 years. The world's blind trust. You've heard the numbers. $34 trillion, $35 trillion, but those numbers have become meaningless to the human brain. We can't comprehend them. So, let me put this in a way that'll make you sit up straight. As of this morning, the United States government is spending more money just to pay the interest on its credit card than it spends on its entire military. More than it spends on children. More than it spends on infrastructure. But that isn't the crisis. The crisis is what happens when the rest of the world stops accepting the credit card. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the liquidity trap. I'm going to show you the 3 phases of the great repricing that has already begun. This isn't about politics. It isn't about who is in the White House. This is about arithmetic. And unfortunately, the math has stopped working. To understand why your retirement account is in danger, we have to look outside of America. For 50 years we had to deal with the world. We bought their goods, and they bought our debt. Saudi Arabia sold oil in dollars, then used those dollars to buy US Treasury bonds. China sold us electronics, then used those dollars to buy US Treasury bonds. It was a perfect loop. It kept our interest rates low and our standard of living high. But that loop has been central banks around the world are currently buying gold at the fastest pace since 1967. Why? Why would a modern central bank buy a barbaric relic like gold instead of safe US Treasuries? Because they know the difference between an asset and a liability. Gold is an asset. It is nobody else's liability. A US Treasury bond is a promise. It is a promise that the US government will tax its future citizens to pay you back. Foreign nations are looking at our $35 trillion debt, our $2 trillion annual deficit, and our political gridlock, and they are deciding that the promise isn't worth the paper it's written on. This is the silent revolt. It's not a declaration of war. It's a diversification of assets. But here's why this matters to you. When China, Japan, and Saudi Arabia stop buying our debt, who is left to buy it? The answer is ... nobody, except us. When the government issues bonds and nobody wants them, the Federal Reserve has to step in and buy them. They print new money to buy the old debt. This is called yield curve control or monetizing the debt. It sounds technical, but here's the translation. Inflation. Not the 3% inflation they tell you about on the news. I'm talking about asset inflation. I'm talking about the destruction of the purchasing power of the currency stored in your savings account. This is phase 1. The world stops buying, so we have to print. And when we print, your labor becomes worth less. Let's get into the mechanics of the death spiral. This is the part that Wall Street doesn't want you to focus on. The US government has a massive portfolio of old debt that was issued when interest rates were near 0%. Imagine you have a mortgage at 2%. It's manageable. But government debt isn't like a 30-year mortgage. It matures constantly. Every month, old bonds expire, and the government has to issue new bonds to pay off the old ones. Here's the trap. They are paying off old debt that costs 1% interest, and replacing it with new debt that costs 4% or 5% interest. This is the compound interest nightmare. Every time they roll over the debt, the cost of servicing that debt jumps. This forces them to borrow more just to pay the interest, which increases the debt even more, which increases the interest even more. Let me give you the raw data. In 2020, the interest expense was roughly $350 billion. Manageable today. It is approaching $1.1 trillion. Projections show that within 10 years, interest payments will consume 50% of all tax revenue. Think about that. Half of every dollar you pay in taxes won't go to roads, or schools, or the military, or healthcare. It will go into a black hole just to keep the lights on in the bond market. When a country hits this point, they have 2 choices. Choice A is default. Tell the bondholders, sorry, we can't pay. This would cause a global depression instantly. Choice B is inflate. Print the money to pay the debt. History from Rome to Weimar, Germany to Argentina tells us that politicians always choose choice B. They will print. They will choose inflation because it is the invisible tax. They won't take money out of your wallet. They will just make the money inside your wallet worth half as much. This brings us to the most dangerous phase, the illusion. You might be looking at your 401k right now and thinking, what is this guy talking about? The market is at all-time highs. My portfolio looks great. This is the nominal illusion. In Venezuela, the stock market went up 4,000% in a single year during their hyperinflation. Did those investors get rich? No. because the cost of bread went up 5,000%. If the stock market goes up 10%, but the currency loses 10% of its purchasing power, you haven't made any profit. You have simply stayed alive. We are entering a period where asset prices, houses, stocks, land will soar in nominal dollar terms. But in real terms, how many hours you have to work to buy them, they are becoming unattainable. The middle class is being hollowed out not by a crash, but by a squeeze. The cost of insurance, energy, food, and housing is rising faster than the official inflation numbers admit. This is the mechanism of the slow collapse. It is a transfer of wealth from the holders of currency to the holders of assets and debt.
So when does the dam break? What is the trigger? It likely won't be one single day. It will be a cascade of smaller failures. Watch the Japanese yen. Japan is the largest holder of U.S. debt. If their currency collapses, or if they are forced to sell U.S. treasuries to save their own economy that floods the market with U.S. bonds, rates spike. The U.S. system breaks. Watch the energy markets. If the petrodollar agreement officially ends, if Saudi Arabia begins accepting Yuan or gold for oil exclusively, the demand for U.S. dollars vanishes. This sends all those dollars that have been exported overseas flooding back home. Watch the U.S. regional banks. These banks are holding massive amounts of commercial real estate debt and government bonds that are losing value. We saw a preview of this in 2023. The next wave will be bigger because the commercial real estate refinancing wall is hitting right now. I know this sounds grim. But remember, panic is not a strategy. Preparation is. Fortunes are made during these transitions. The wealth doesn't disappear. It moves. It moves from those who hold paper promises to those who hold real things. So, how do you position yourself? First, minimize counterparty risk. Understand that money in the bank is technically a loan you have made to the bank. In a liquidity crisis, access to that capital can be restricted. Keep some liquidity outside of the digital banking system. Second, own scarcity. In a world of infinite paper money, finite assets become the king. This includes precious metals like gold and silver, which have been the ultimate hedge against sovereign debt failure for 5,000 years. It includes Bitcoin, the first digital asset with absolute scarcity that cannot be diluted by a central bank. It includes productive land and real estate. Third, understand that fixed-rate debt is your friend. If you have a 30-year fixed mortgage at 3% or 4% and inflation goes to 10%, the bank is paying you to live in your house. The real value of your debt decreases as the currency is debased. And finally, focus on skill acquisition. The ultimate hedge against economic downturn is your ability to generate value. Invest in your own earning power. The American experiment isn't over, but the easy money era is. We are moving from a financial world based on trust and promises to a financial world based on collateral and proof. The transition will be volatile. The headlines will be scary. But if you understand the roadmap, if you understand that the debt forces the printing, and the printing forces the asset inflation, you don't have to be a victim of this shift. You can be the person who saw it coming. Don't watch the stock market. Watch the bond market. Watch the interest payments. That is where the truth is hiding.